Hey everybody, it is You Had to Ask, the show where I answer your questions. And this week my first question comes from Amber A, who says, "Hello Steve, I was wondering, what do you think about states trying to make the Bible its official book? I know that Mississippi and some other southern states have tried to do this in the past and failed. I would have no problem with it if they treated the Bible like a work of fiction, which it is, of course, but I know that these states do not see it that way. Your thoughts?" Part of me wants to sort of put that sort of thing in the same category as like having "In God We Trust" on the money, or having "Under God" in the Pledge of Allegiance, as things which I do object to and do find to be, technically incorrect in terms of separation of church and state, but that aren't really all that harmful, practically speaking, and are probably not issues worth getting all worked up over. But then again, I mean, the efforts to have the Bible as the official state book, or occasionally you hear about a state legislature or even the United States Congress passing a resolution that declares a given day to be like Jesus Day, or such and such of a year is the year of the Bible. Like they're obsessed with going right up to the line of violating separation. Like they're not, they do not value secular government as I would like them to. And I think a lot of people, a lot of people of a particular religious mindset, just they don't have an understanding of secularism, that secularism is actually their best friend. That having a government that is secular, that takes no position on religion, that doesn't go out of its way to celebrate Jesus or celebrate Christianity or sing the praises of the Bible as the Word of God, that a government that is silent on all of those matters is the best friend that they and their church could ever have, because that is the government that will guarantee the liberty and the freedom of that church, and will not favor any church over that church. Will favor all churches equally. Will not play favorites with religion. But see, that's the problem, because they want the government to play favorites. They want the government to favor their church. And that's not fair. But that's not an option. And since that's not an option, and that can't be an option, they really should be embracing secularism and embracing a government that is silent and neutral on matters of religion, rather than constantly trying to co-opt the government to give it the appearance of being Christian, even though legally it can't be. So when I look at it that way, it becomes more of a problem, but more in terms of the larger problem that it points to, the attitude, the negative attitude, the hostile attitude that many religiously minded lawmakers have towards secularism. Solar Dragon 007. Hey Steve, are you looking forward to the upcoming Daredevil Netflix series? Also, are you a fan of the Daredevil character? Thanks. I am a fan of Daredevil. I can't say that I've read a huge amount of Daredevil comics, but I've read Frank Miller's run in the early 80s, which really is the run that put Frank Miller on the map as an artist and eventually as a writer, and I thought that stuff was excellent. And I read Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale did a Daredevil limited series back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I forget when exactly, called Daredevil Yellow, that I remember really enjoying, particularly for Tim Sale's artwork. Tim Sale is one of my favorite artists. And I really enjoyed that too. I think Daredevil is a terrific character, and I am looking forward to the Netflix series. I was sort of lukewarm on it until I saw the first trailer, and when I saw the trailer, and especially when I saw Vincent D'Onofrio as Kingpin, I thought, oh, this could be good. I'm really looking forward to seeing it and seeing if it does live up to how good the trailer makes it look, because it does look terrific. And Vincent D'Onofrio, who has been one of my favorite actors since, Full Metal Jacket, and as someone who I always like seeing pop up in things, really has me interested in that Daredevil series. So yeah, I'm interested to see it. I hope that it turns out to be good, because I like Daredevil, and the trailer makes it look like something worth checking out. Sib Tiger, were there any books in school you really didn't want to read but came to cherish? This is what happened with me and To Kill a Mockingbird. I wouldn't say that I didn't want to read To Kill a Mockingbird, but I probably wouldn't have read it if not for having to read it in school. And I did end up really, really enjoying it. And that was also the same class where we watched the film of To Kill a Mockingbird, and it was the first time I had seen that film, so it also introduced me to a wonderful film that I now enjoy and cherish. But for me, the best example would probably be Homer's The Odyssey, which I didn't read until I was in college. And it wasn't something I was necessarily reluctant to read, but it was just, it's an assignment. In college, you have so much to read, especially if you're going for an English degree. You have so much reading to do. And some of it is really interesting, and it's like the sort of thing that, oh, wow, I'm so glad I read this. And some of it is just, you skim it, and you hope you can just remember a few things for the class discussion so you can look like you read it. And then the rest of it, you just want to get through it as quickly as possible. But I read The Odyssey for an English lit class in college, and I would never have read that if not for that class. And now The Odyssey is one of my favorite things ever. Like I adore The Odyssey. I think it's just so beautiful, and I love the and of course I talk about how much I love the language of some of the passages, and of course we're talking about translations, and there are multiple English translations of the Odyssey, and they all sound a little bit different. But there are certain passages of the Odyssey that just take my breath away. They're so well written and are just remarkable. So I would say the Odyssey as something that I would not have read if it weren't for school, and now it's one of my favorite things ever. Ahoy Yerno! As a European, I have a weird perspective on American politics. From my perspective, the Republicans are wrong 100% of the time, but that might be because only the crazy trickles through into the European media. Which three of their policies could you support if the Republican Party didn't have the crazy shit? Like, are there proper, decent senators who do positive work in important issues? Do they propose serious legislation that'd benefit the country? I think there are well-intentioned Republican senators. I think there are Republican senators who are more serious than others, who regard the radicals and the Tea Party types within their party as an embarrassment, much in the same way as someone from a more liberal mindset would. But, I have to be honest, when I really try to think about Republican policies, Republican principles that I could support, I'm coming up empty. I mean, I don't think that they're all crazy. I don't think that they're all radicals. I do think that many of them are reasonable people, and they have the best interests of their state or their country at heart. But I just think they're wrong. I mean, I think most of the mainstream, as I sit here thinking about it, all of the major Republican Party principles are things that I wouldn't support. And someone left a comment on your question on the video last week, and they listed a whole litany of Republican policies, some of which are very mainstream and middle of the road, and some of which are a little more on the radical, sort of far right end of the spectrum. But none of them are things I could support. I mean, they're very skeptical and hostile towards environmentalism. They are very quick to advocate for cuts in social welfare programs. They're very quick to blame poor people for their own problems. They are dubious at best towards issues pertaining to racial minorities or to women or to LGBT people. They are much more closely aligned with the wealthy than with the poor or the struggling or even the middle class these days. They have a very, very aggressive concept of what foreign policy should be, a very militaristic view of foreign policy. What I consider to be a very exploitive view of the military. I feel like Republican politicians have a terrible attitude toward the military. Outwardly toward the public, they are very cheery and very patriotic and yay, let's go troops, we love the troops, thank you for your service. But then they are so willing to send these people into harm's way for what I consider to be insufficient reasons, insufficiently compelling reasons. There are all sorts of things that are Republican policies, Republican beliefs that I just can't get behind. I mean, they oppose labor unions, they oppose raising the minimum wage, they oppose funding for education, they oppose funding for the sciences. And some of them would be very happy to sell off every acre of national park land if they thought that it could profit them or someone who they are friends with, or to whom they owe a political favor. They're not all crazy, but I can't think of any major policy of theirs that I could, in good conscience, support. Ramses the Stone. A question for Americans, as I really can't tell. Does this internet phenomenon of feminazis actually exist and have any influence in real life? I live in Europe and I have never met a single hardcore feminist, so I've concluded that this is something that just happens on the internet. Is this different in the US? I mean, does Sarkeesian actually influence politics? Well, first of all, no, Anita Sarkeesian does not influence politics in any significant way. In fact, I'm of the opinion, even though I like Anita Sarkeesian and as I said last week, I do not understand the vitriol that she and her work generates. But I really believe that she would not even have the influence and the visibility that she has were it not for how determined and outspoken her haters are. I think that one of the most offensive things, one of the stupidest things about all of the hatred toward Anita Sarkeesian on the internet is how self-defeating it is. They, more than anyone else, have elevated her to a position of prominence, at least relative prominence within a certain sphere of the internet, that she probably would not have attained, or at least not have attained to the degree that she has attained it without them. They, in terms of public relations and in terms of her career, are the best friends she could ever have. And I'm not justifying any of their behavior. The death threats, the harassment, the bullying is all completely out of bounds and they should all be ashamed of themselves. But strictly speaking, in terms of raising her profile, they are more responsible for raising her profile and for exposing her and her work to a wider audience than they might like to think. So it's a completely self-defeating enterprise. But I'm like you. I have never met someone who I consider to be a feminazi. That word is a construct of people who are anti-feminist anyway. I first heard it used by Rush Limbaugh. He's the one who came up with the term feminazi. It's a caricature. It's not representative of real people or real attitudes or real beliefs. I have known feminists who have generally negative attitudes toward men. I have known feminists who have a more aggressive, angry attitude when they talk about the issues that are of interest to them. But this idea of sort of the anti-male, angry, feminist, misandrist, boogie woman is just that. It's a myth. I have lots of friends online who identify as feminists, who identify as radical feminists, who even jokingly identify as man-hating feminists or misandrists, who post pictures on their Twitter feeds or their Facebook pages of the coffee mug that has male tears written on it. Like, I know a lot of women like that, and I find them all to be really wonderful people, and I get along with them great as a man. So I have not encountered the angry, man-hating, feminazi either. I think that it's something that is almost entirely perpetuated by opponents of feminism, by people who wish to straw man and caricature feminism for their own purposes. Tyson Parman. Steve, looking for a third-party opinion here. I'm a newcomer to your channel and really enjoy your An Atheist Reads series. So much so that I felt a need to sharpen my own tools for critical reading and thinking. I'm working my way through books by Hitchens and other atheists, so taking on more reading from apologists seems a little daunting. Also, I've been curious about what my family, friends, and neighbors are being told when they go to church. So, to kill two birds, I've been visiting the website of a local church, which my brother and other friends attend, and have been doing some critical analysis of the videos and audio recordings of sermons. The church is pretty conservative and has a relatively large following of college students. While watching these sermons and taking notes, it's as if I can feel the steam start to jet from my ears, and it's difficult to keep the vitriol off the page. The pastor is telling these kids or their parents that are paying thousands of dollars for a college education that their university and professors are lying to them, that they are wasting their money on pseudoscience, and that the answers they're looking for can be found in the good book. He even goes so far as to single out a young woman who is struggling with evolution and cosmology versus the creation myth. After I've calmed down a bit, I get a sort of icky feeling, like I'm sitting back and taking obsessive or voyeuristic pot shots at the pastor. My question, does this seem like obsessive behavior to you? Again, I don't plan on showing my notes to friends that attend the church, mailing them to the church itself, or sharing them with anyone really. Maybe I'm just not used to such an emotional reaction while trying to be analytical at the same time. Thoughts? Oh, I can relate to a lot of that. I can relate to the getting worked up emotionally when you're trying to do something, intellectual and analytical and try to be detached, but you just can't help it but get all worked up. I think that's natural. And you say you're new to my channel. I don't know if you are new as an atheist in general, but if that is the case, atheism is just like anything else. When you first become a part of it, when you first embrace it, you sort of have a zealotry that you lose over time. Even before I was an atheist, I used to, I would watch TBN. I would watch the evangelical, the televangelist shows on TBN, like Kenneth Copeland or John Hagee or Benny Hinn. And more often than not, they would end up pissing me off, but I would watch them anyway. It was like this voyeuristic fascination I had with them. So I can relate to that. I've listened to sermons on websites from churches before too. I've done that, and I can relate to everything you're saying. If you're still doing this sort of thing in 5 or 10 years, I might worry about it. Then it might be obsessive if this becomes your life. But no, there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, you're doing something that you feel compelled to do that for whatever reason you need to do, and there's nothing wrong with it. Maybe it's something that you just need to get out of your system. Maybe you are facing arguments and facing questions that you feel you need to answer for yourself right now, just to articulate your position. That's one of the main reasons why I do the An Atheist Read series, both for myself and also for people who watch, is to present the arguments against atheism or against my position or for the contrary position, and then to be able to put into words and explain in hopefully a clear way why I think something else, why I think this is wrong, and why I believe that I'm right. I think that's important. I think it's important to understand the arguments of people who disagree with you, and also to be able to articulate your position and be able to explain why you believe what you believe instead of what they believe. I think that's an important thing to do, and maybe what you're doing with the sermons from this church is a form of that. And if that's the case, I think it's perfectly normal. I don't think it's obsessive at all. I don't see any reason why you should stop. I mean, if it starts to affect your mental state, then that would be another thing. For instance, if you find yourself reacting to sounds of thunder that aren't really there, for instance, just to pull an example out of the air, then you might consider just taking a step back. But until then, it's perfectly fine. Hey, guess what? Speaking of things that are perfectly fine, what the fuck does that even mean? It's time for
the lightning round. Rapid fire questions, glib and adequate answers.
Yo, Freed. Okay, here's a weird one. Do you think a creationist equivalent to the creationist cat can ever exist? I can't even imagine such a thing. It's just like how there is no right-wing equivalent to Jon Stewart. Why? What is stopping them? Thoughts? Well, judging by past results, I would say horrible senses of humor are what is stopping them. The few right-wing or Christian attempts at humor or satire that I have seen, either on TV, like on Fox News, or on the internet, have not been pretty, have not been funny, have just been horrible, horrible failures. Mark Norton, Steve, do you see yourself as more casual elegance or urban eclectic? Which is the one where you just put on whatever you feel like wearing and you don't put any thought into your wardrobe at all? Because that's the one that I am. Jason, with a D. Okay, related question to the when are we going to have an atheist president? Which past American president do you suspect was a closeted atheist? My current suspicions fall on John Adams and possibly Jefferson. Yeah, I would go with you on Jefferson. Lincoln, I think we have to throw in there because I think Lincoln and Jefferson were two of the only presidents not to have an official religious affiliation. Like, they did not claim themselves to be affiliated with any particular denomination. So I think you have to throw Lincoln in there. I think Taft, too. I don't think Taft ever said he was an atheist, but I think he was a Unitarian, and at one point he made some public statement about how he didn't believe in the divinity of Christ. So I think you have to kind of throw Taft into the conversation, too. Radical Bacon. Richard Dawkins blocked someone on Twitter for asking him if he touched poop for $20. Should the doc block me on principle? Also, would you touch poop for $20? Yeah, I would. Actually, I have a cat, so I touch poop on a semi-regular basis for no money at all. Yeah, see? Exactly. The cat that just made a noise. That cat. I touch that cat's shit regularly. It's not my choice. It's part of the job of a cat owner. For no money at all. So yeah, I would do it for $20. But yes, Dawkins should block you on principle because you really think he would touch it for $20? You're talking about Richard Dawkins. He's a fucking best-selling author. You're gonna have to come up with more than $20 to get Dawkins to touch some poop. That's all I'm saying. Skull Maris. Hey, hi Steve. So I have to ask, in all your studying of apologist works, have you ever seen any good arguments? I'm trying to take a moderate approach to the whole religion versus atheism debate, but when all the religious side have are the same old tired fallacies and condescending rhetoric, I am finding it really hard to keep an open mind toward their views. Thanks. I honestly have never heard like a really good argument, but some apologists are better at presenting the arguments than others. And the example I always revert to is C.S. Lewis. I don't think C.S. Lewis's arguments are any better than anybody else's, but he has a much better way of presenting them. And he comes up with really creative, very clear, concise examples of what he's talking about, or illustrations of his concepts that really put him at a level above other apologists that I have reviewed. So I would recommend him, but the arguments themselves aren't any better. Just the presentation of them and the creativity in laying out the arguments. Ezra Henderson, do you have a Twitter? Yeah, I do. It's linked on my channel page under the banner, and I can just give it to you right now. It's at Steve_Shives. That's me on Twitter. Follow me, if you will. JJ Talks. Okay, I have a question for you. Once More with Feeling, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, versus Smile Time, Angel. I gotta go with Smile Time. You're basically presenting me with musical versus puppets, and I'm gonna go puppets every time on that one. Yeah, definitely Smile Time. Rave times 24. Steve, do you think a reboot of Quantum Leap might be successful if rebooted? I missed that show. You know, I think it probably would not be successful, but I miss that show too. I love Quantum Leap so much that I would go along with it. I would watch it just to see, just with my fingers crossed, hoping that it would not be the shit show that it probably would turn out being. But yes, I would love to see them at least try to bring back Quantum Leap because I miss that show a lot. Graphiest, hey Steve, you mentioned you were relatively close to DC. Do you ever visit? Do you have a favorite place on the National Mall, Memorial, or Museum? You know, I don't visit DC as often as you would think, given how close I am to it. I was just there like a month or two ago, actually, and that was the first time I had been there like since the Reason rally, like 3 years ago. My favorite place is the Air and Space Museum. I try to stop by the Air and Space Museum every time I'm in DC. I love it. I could spend all day at the Air and Space Museum. Umar Sories. Hey Steve, I told JJ of JJ Talks I'd ask you, so here it goes. On her recent Friday show, she did a topic called Fuck, Marry, Kill. She listed YouTubers to do progressive videos and said which one she'd do to either. It was in the spirit of good fun, and when she got to your name, she said she'd marry you because you're a Buffy fan. I did not know if you mentioned this before, but I told her that if you were a Buffy fan, that makes you the total package in my mind, as I'm a huge Buffy fan. I'm one of those who rewatches the entire series constantly. Anyway, I said if you guys got married, you could perform Once More with Feeling together and film it for YouTube. She said she'd love to do that, and I was wondering if you'd consider it. I would pay to see that. Well, I mean, I I guess if I wasn't married, and if JJ would have me. You're not talking about us getting married. You're talking about us singing the songs from the Buffy musical, which JJ actually mentioned in her question. How strange. Yeah, I would do it. I mean, I don't know what the logistics of that would be, but it sounds like it would be a really fun thing to do. I would totally do it. I would humiliate myself. But yeah, I would totally do that. Cassidy Robinson, here's a few quickies for the lightning round. Okay, I'll take these one at a time. Hitchcock or Kubrick? Ooh, Kubrick. Oh, that's a tough one. Chocolate or cheese? Chocolate. Mixtapes or playlists? You know, I would have to say playlists now. I've been won over by playlists. I mean, back 5-10 years ago, I would have said mixtapes because I was old school. Now, I've been converted to the future, so playlists. Rolling Stones or the Beatles? Rolling Stones. Sabbath or Zeppelin? Zeppelin. Nirvana or the Pixies? Ooh, I'm going to say the Pixies. And I can thank my wife for that. She kind of got me into the Pixies. Tarantino or P.T. Anderson? Anderson. Got to go with my heart. I love Tarantino, but P.T. Anderson. Pizza or burgers? Burgers. Again, goddamn, that's a tough one. But if I try to think of which one I could not possibly live without. And I think if I had to, I could do without pizza. I wouldn't want to do without burgers, though. That's a tough one. Yeah, so anyway, that's it for the lightning round. That was the last question. Thanks, everybody, for the questions. Before I get out of here, I'm going to do a shout-out. The shout-out this week goes to a really cool channel that I've been meaning to shout out for a little while. I was made aware of his channel a few months ago, and he does really, really good content and is just starting to develop a good subscriber base, which you can get in on, because he's only got about 3,000 or so subs, 3,500 at this point, so lots of room to grow. And very deserving. And the channel is the one that belongs to That Atheist Guy. It's kind of a generic name, but then again, that's kind of why it works, don't you think? That Atheist Guy. He does videos on a wide variety of atheism-related topics. He has a couple of series that he does on his channel, a series of videos on Bible fails. He has a series called Five Most, like the five most annoying things that Christians say, or the five most self-defeating Christians. There's 5 most self-defeating things that Christians say, I think, is one that was really interesting. Toxic religious principles is another one that he does, where he talks about like why the idea of the afterlife, for instance, is like a destructive principle, is something that actually does more harm for people to believe in than good. It's really, really interesting stuff. He has a good presentation. He's comfortable on camera. It's very simple and clean, and I really, really like his stuff. So That Atheist Guy. Check out his channel. If it's your cup of tea, subscribe. Let him know that you like his work, you support his work, because I think it deserves some likes and some support. That Atheist Guy. Check it out. That's the shout out this week. Well, that's it, everybody. I'm done. Before I go, though, I want to remind you to leave a comment on this video, to leave me your question for next time, because in order for me to do this next time, you have to ask. So leave a comment, ask me your question for next time. You can ask me anything about anything. Nothing is too serious. Nothing is too silly. And I will answer as many of your questions as I possibly feel like answering next time. So I'll see you next time, everybody. Take care.